Hi, I'm Linus Sebastian. Welcome to NCIX Tech Tips. As you can see, today we have the NCIX Water Cooling Essentials 120 Water Cooling Kit, and today we'll be looking at how to install that in a standard ATX chassis. So once you get everything unpacked, you've got your CPU water block. So here we've got a Magicool CPU water block. It's an all-copper block, which prevents corrosion. Then you've got your radiator, and we've got a Magicool single 120mm radiator. Then you've got your tubing, and we're using MasterClear 7/16 inch tubing. Then you've got a T, which serves to act as a replacement for a reservoir. A tubing plug, which plugs the tubing at the top of your T-line. Then you've got your hose clamps, which prevent leaks around the barbs. And then you've got a pump, which is going to serve to move water around to the radiator where the heat can be dissipated back to the air, and to the CPU block where it can be taken away from the CPU. Then the last thing is you've got a fan, which attaches to the radiator to pull air through the radiator and dissipate heat. Okay, the first step for mounting the CPU block is to take the bolt and put one of the little washers all the way down to the bottom of the bolt. Then you're going to take the bolt and put it through the back of the motherboard, like so. Then the other washer goes on top of the bolt with a little bit of difficulty here. There we go, all the way down to the bottom. Then you take the nut and screw it down all the way until the bolt is not going to move when you screw something onto the top of it. So you'll do that 4 times, once for each corner of the CPU, and then you're ready to put the CPU block on. The next step in the CPU block installation is once you've got the thermal compound applied to the CPU, you take the warning label off the bottom of the block, put the block over top of your CPU between the 4 screws. Then you take your hold down plate and slide it down the screws in the appropriate slots onto the top of the CPU block until it's snug. You can see we have our motherboard reinstalled in the NCIX Sonata 2 case. The CPU water block is on the CPU, and the next step now is to install the radiator in the back of the case. So the first thing we're going to do is, of the 8 screws included with the radiator, you're going to use the 4 shorter ones and put them from the back of the case into the inside, like so. Once the 4 screws in the fan are in place, it's actually quite simple to install the radiator. All you do is take the radiator with the barbs up to the top, because that makes it easier to bleed the air of bubbles out of the system. So with the barbs facing the top of your case, then you just take the radiator, place it against the fan, and then put in the 4 screws. I've already done 3, but just the last one, a little bit like that. It is very important not to use screws that are too long or to over tighten them, because then you can either puncture the fins on the radiators, or you can also cause the threads to strip, and then you won't be able to mount the radiator properly. So there you have it, that's the radiator installation. Mounting the pump is a fairly simple affair, actually. You've got a couple options. You can use double-sided tape, you can use zip ties, you can use pretty much anything that your imagination can do with it. The one requirement is that the pump needs to be lower than the other parts of your loop. That way it will never run out of water, because air bubbles will always rise out of the pump and water will come down to it. What I've done here is I've used foam just out of packing material, and I've used 2 zip ties to fasten my pump. As you can see, it's quite secure, it's not going anywhere. Once all the components of the water cooling system are assembled, the next step is to plumb it all together. So what we've done is we've run the tubing from the inlet of the pump, which is the horizontal barb, to the outlet of the pump. Then it will go from there up to the radiator, from the radiator down to the CPU, then from the CPU back down to the pump. So just to demonstrate how to fit the tubing over the barb, it's a little bit of a snug fit, but you just push it firmly until it is all the way down, just like that. Off camera, we installed 2 sides of the 3 prongs of the T. The reason for that is it's actually quite difficult to push 7/16 tubing over 1/2 inch plastic barbs. One thing that you can use though, to make it easier, and actually you can use this on your metal barbs as well, is Swift-Tech Hydrax. It's an additive that makes your water UV green, it lubricates your pump, and it also acts as an anti-corrosive agent. You take a little bit of Hydrax on your finger, smear it around the inside of the tubing, and then you can slide it onto the barb much more easily. So that's the method that we're going to use for installing the last barb. So you can see the green from the Hydrax inside the tubing here, and we're just going to push that on until it goes all the way over the plastic barb. This will prevent leaks. For as long as there's been water cooling, there's been the debate of what is the best coolant to use. There are all kinds of coolants. There's Xerox, Pentacin, these are very popular in the water cooling market, but we're going to look at the more basic ones today. There's pure water, which you can use in a loop as long as you're using all the same metal. So our block and our radiator are both copper. That means that we don't have to worry about corrosion. If we had, for example, an aluminum VGA block in the system, then we could potentially run into corrosion problems using pure water. Another very popular, actually water replacement, because it's not an additive. You use Fluid XP Extreme instead of water. It's available in many colors, including black, blood red. There's one that goes from green to orange, depending on whether it's under a black light. But Fluid XP is a little bit unique because it's non-corrosive, performs almost as well as water, if not equal or better. And it's also non-conductive. That means if it spills, it will not cause an electrical short. Some people use pure water, but most people are going to use some kind of additive in their system. Probably the most basic additive is to just use a little bit of iodine. You can pick this up at the drugstore for about $5, and you just put a few drops in your system, and it's not anti-corrosive, but what it is it's a biocide, and it will keep any microorganisms from growing inside your loop. Now, if you are using a loop that does require some kind of corrosion inhibitor, there's always Swift-Tech Hydrax, which actually has a fair number of purposes. It inhibits corrosion, it lubricates your pump, and it dyes your water UV green. We'll be using Swift-Tech Hydrax for the purpose of this video. So now that we've mixed the coolant, Swift-Tech actually recommends a 5 to 10% mixture. Usually it's okay to eyeball that, but they want 5% for normal everyday use, and 10% Swift-Tech says can go up to 5 years without being changed. So always use a funnel when you're pouring water into your water cooling system. They can be had at the dollar store for as little as $1. So please get a funnel. Go ahead and put the funnel inside the top of the tubing, and then you can start to pour. You should see the water bubbles come up through the funnel. Try not to let the liquid fill the funnel. It's going to make it overflow, and then the fluid can run down the tubing into the system. So it's important to hold the tubing away from your computer.